Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm really excited because for someone who was born and raised in Connecticut, I could appreciate what this man meant to Connecticut, to high school sports, what he's done in his professional life, and he is an honor to have on the show. He was the former manager of the Texas Rangers, New York Mets, Boston Red Sox. He's a terrific human being, and he has done a lot in the community, especially, like I said, in the great state of Connecticut, the one and only Bobby Valentine. And Bobby, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor.
Okay, Mike, good to be with you. I remember a tenth of my life was spent in Japan managing
Yeah.
the Chiba Lotte Marines, too. So we
Yeah.
don't want to forget that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Bobby, first thing I wanted to ask you, there was no Pop Warner when you were a little kid. So, did you have a love for football as a kid, or was it mainly basketball and baseball at the time?
Ouch. There was Pop Warner. It was just getting started back in about 61, I guess, 1960 or 61. When I was 12 years old, I went out for Pop Warner, made the team. And then the night before the season started, the coach said everyone had to have a crew cut. And at the time, I had a lot of pompadour hair sticking up on my head. I was taking dance lessons, and I thought that was a lousy idea, so I didn't play.
Wow. And interestingly enough, Bobby, I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but there haven't been many athletes who have made all state 3 years in a row. And you were very you have that honor, you did that. And I think about just your career. I mean, in high school football, you were a tremendous athlete who could do everything. And I can recall a game where I think you scored 6 touchdowns in one game and 5 in the first half, and one was a punt, one was an interception, a kickoff return, a run, and a reception. And that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's basically like that's how invaluable you were. You could do everything the coach asked you to do.
Yeah, I was really lucky. My junior high school closed in Stamford, Connecticut, and ninth graders got to go to high school. So I learned all the plays as a ninth grader and got to start as a 10th grader. We had an all-state team, and we went undefeated. I was lucky enough to get the ball, score 20-something touchdowns, I guess, and be all-state as a sophomore. Otherwise, it's really hard, or at least it was then, to make the football team as a sophomore because you didn't know the plays. School was just started.
Yeah. And Bobby, let me ask you, back when you played, I know like even probably the late 80s as well, the equipment wasn't the same as it is now. I mean, the helmets, I don't think the face masks were like they are now. So, I mean, it seemed like it was harder back then to stay healthy and avoid concussions and stuff. But why do you feel like so many young athletes are getting so many concussions, especially when it seems like the equipment is a lot better?
Well, I had concussions. Let's not think there weren't any. I was on the sideline a few times. And the way you got back in the game in those days, you had to tell the doctor what day it was. And I had one of my teammates come over and tell me it was Saturday. I kept saying it was Tuesday, and I got back in the game. But I had a few of those concussions where once I went into the other team's huddle, but somehow they slapped you around a little, and you went back in and played.
Now, do you buy the theory that turf causes a lot of concussions, or it doesn't really matter whether it's turf or grass?
Well, when you hit your back of the head and go down, and it's on turf, I think it's a little harder than a lot of the grass surfaces. So I would have to think it does cause
Yeah.
some
I,
percentage more. Yeah.
I would definitely agree. And, Bobby, back when you played in the 60s, I mean, high school football was very popular. I mean, it really was. And there were so many great football programs. And, they were introducing new offenses, new defenses. So, I mean, you really played at a time where high school football really exploded. And what I find remarkable about your career, and I think, junior or senior year, you had 74 points, which back then was just unheard of, is that you played at a time where there were no spread offenses or anything like that, and you still had an unbelievable career.
Yeah. We didn't kick many extra points, so we ran for the extra points are passed for him all the time, and that added to the point total. 2 yards was pretty, or 3 yards, whatever the heck it was pretty easy to get in those days.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, let me ask you. I believe that you were offered like a $70,000 signing bonus to go to USC and be running back there, and I think it was a little conversation with Tommy Lasorda that changed your mind. I think you sat and watched the game with him one time, and he gave you a little radio or something like that, and he told you whenever you listen to it, think of the Dodgers. Is that did he play a big part in you choosing baseball over football?
Wow, yeah, I was on a recruiting trip to USC. Actually, I was just getting a scholarship. It wasn't $70,000. It was a full scholarship to play football and baseball at USC. Tuition in those days, room and board, was $1,700, just to put it in perspective. But the Dodgers drafted me number one as a baseball player in the June draft, and it was only the third draft ever in the history of baseball. So you know, I didn't really know what was going on. Andy Robustelli was the general manager of the New York Giants. He's a Stanford guy, friend of the family. Helped talk to the Dodgers when they came in to sign me, and I got a $65,000 signing bonus, and chose to be a professional rather than stay an amateur. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
also,
Tommy Lasorda, and just
yeah,
the Tommy Lasorda, when I went to SC to be recruited, he was a scout. He was in the stands. He did recognize me. He did come over. I don't know if he recognized me or Al Campanis, the general manager he was with, recognized me. He came over, sat with me a couple minutes, gave me a transistor radio, which was illegal, I guess, to do. And then when I signed, he was my first professional manager ever in Ogden, Utah. It was an amazing time. I was 18 years old. It was 1968. He was in rookie league. I was in rookie league. Zach Manassian was in rookie league as our clubhouse guy. He wrote a book about that 1968 season by interviewing last year all the players he could find from the team and putting their memories together. It's quite the book. It's called Lasorda University. It's out there. Nice Christmas book. And matter of fact, Valentine's Way is out there too. My book. If anybody wants a Christmas present there, it's pretty easy reading.
nice, very nice. And I'm fast forwarding a little bit here, Bobby. But what did it feel like for you? How gratifying was it to be able to have Tommy on your coaching staff for that 2001 All Star game? Because you took him as your third base coach. He was an honorary third base coach, and that had to be a wonderful moment for you because I know how much of a mentor he was to you.
Yeah, that's a good job on your part, Mike. Yeah. I played for Tommy in the minor leagues in rookie ball and in AAA 2 years. I played for him in Caracas, Venezuela. We won the Caribbean World Series out of Dominican Republic in the 70s. But I got to the big leagues before he did. I was waiting for him. He didn't get there in time. I got traded. Years later, he was the manager, and so I never got to be in uniform with him. And then when I got to manage an All-Star game in Seattle in 2001 after winning the National League Championship in 2000 with the Mets, the commissioner, Bud Selig at the time, granted me permission to have him on the team in uniform. And interesting, there's highlights about Tommy Lasorda. When you see Vladimir Guerrero's bat goes
Yeah.
flying through the air. It was headed for Tommy, who was coaching third base that inning, and almost hit him in the head. He did a back roll, and it became a highlight.
Yeah, I remember that very fondly. And what a great manager he was. And I'll tell you what, he was so good for the game of baseball. I mean, when you talk about just a guy who loved baseball, loved the Dodgers, I mean, that guy was, everything that was right about baseball, in my opinion.
Yeah, he was great on the field and off the field, and he was a real colorful guy. He could speak at after dinners. I was with him when he opened up a press conference at the White House for Ronald Reagan, and then later I brought him to the White House when George W. Bush was there, and he could whine, he could dine, he could speak with anyone, and was a Renaissance guy. You know, he could sing. He was he only had an eighth grade education, but he was the best speller I was ever around, and he spoke four different languages. So Tommy Lasorda was a pretty special guy.
Yeah, most definitely. And Bobby, your time at USC, a roommate of yours who was a tremendous baseball player, and he passed a few years ago, but just a wonderful baseball player, and that's Billy Buckner. And it used to bother me so much for all the heat he took in Boston because if you watch that World Series Game 6, the Mets had or the Red Sox had a 5-3 lead with 2 outs, nobody on, and nobody ever got on Calvin Schiraldi or Bob Stanley for blowing that game, but yet they always seem to give Bill Buckner a hard time. And I just really thought another great guy for baseball. And talk about your relationship with him because he was one of a kind.
Yeah, we played together on that rookie league team. We played together in AAA. We played together in the major leagues
Yeah.
for the Dodgers. He was one of my best friends. Great hitter, great player. John McNamara left him in the game because he had a sentimental piece of his heart. Billy Buckner wanted to be on the field when they won the championship. Instead of putting Dave Stapleton in for defense, he left Buck on the field. That ground ball by Mookie went through his legs. Yeah, and there's no justice what was done to him in Boston. What that he was remembered for one silly ground ball instead of the 2,700 hits and the All-Star teams he made and the great play that he exhibited every day. Billy Buck was one special guy.
Yeah, and what a year he had in '86 for the Red Sox. And I think sometimes, like I said, people tend to forget that because he's a big reason why they won the pennant that year.
Yeah, it's regretful. They just remember what they want to remember it. But anyway, yeah, I got Larry Lucchino to allow him to throw out a first pitch. He threw out a first pitch. He got a standing ovation. Uh, Almost was forgiven there, but it was never forgotten as far as Buck was concerned. That was one of the most unjust things that ever happened in the world of sports.
Yeah, it really was. Bobby, interestingly enough, you were the manager for two of Nolan Ryan's no hitters, but I think a lot of people forget as well that I think you were the center fielder or left fielder when he threw his first ever no hitter. So talk about that a little bit. And I mean, what was it like getting to play behind him? It had to be just awesome to watch.
Yeah, I got traded to the Angels in '73 from the Dodgers, and yeah, he did throw his first no hitter there in May 17th, I think, or maybe May 15th, 1973. Then I got fast forward 20 years later. After I broke my leg, I was no longer a very good player. I became a coach, and then I became a manager. And Nolan Ryan was a free agent. We got to sign him as a free agent with the Texas Rangers. People thought he was through, and he went on to throw his sixth no hitter, his seventh no hitter, of course, his 5,000 strikeout game, which was really memorable, and also his 300th win were all done while I was managing the Rangers, and he was on the team. And every day was a special day when Nolan took the field, and he has he has a great documentary out. If people haven't seen it, they really should. I think it's called Facing Nolan, or I don't know the name of the documentary, but it's spectacular.
Right. And what a pitcher. And I mean, you think about him pitching until he was like 45, 46 years old. And I mean, he did it cleanly. I mean, there was never, any substances ever suspected. He was just a wonderful pitcher. And I mean, he took the ball every fifth day. And let me tell you, he was the type of pitcher that would throw 130 something pitches and he didn't care. It didn't matter to him. And he was just like a real credit to the game of baseball.
Well, I played in a game when he threw 236 pitches. As a matter of fact, he struck out 19. He walked 11 and he pitched 13 complete innings and got a no decision. How about that? Yeah.
So, Bobby, let me ask you, your first full year in Texas, it was 1986, and boy, what a turnaround that team had from the previous season. And I remember a young Ruben Sierra, I think, was on that team, and that's what I always think about you, Bobby, is you were so good at developing those young players and really like helping them grow as baseball players. I think of Ruben Sierra. I think of Timo Perez, Jay Payton, guys like that, Bobby Witt. I mean, you were always good at like making sure that you did what you needed to do to get these guys ready to the next step, and you didn't rush things. And I always say Ruben Sierra played his best baseball when he played under you. So just talk about that a little bit.
Oh, Ruben Sierra, he was from Puerto Rico. He wore 21 in Roberto Clemente's honor, and he was a switch hitter. He could run like the wind, hit home runs from both sides of the plate. Regretfully, he, after not winning the MVP in '89 when he should have, and
Yeah.
Robin Yount, well, it was a real close race. I think maybe it even could have been a dual MVP like they did with Keith Hernandez and Willie Stargell back in the day, but he didn't get it. And the next year, he came back. I think he took some steroids, didn't do him right. He was overweight. He was muscle bound, and Ruben was never the great Ruben that he was prior to that. And he was some kind of special player.
Yeah, I really felt like I would say around 1990, I said this kid's going to go to the Hall of Fame. And it seemed like after he left Texas, he just wasn't the same player anymore. But I mean, just watching, I used to love watching those Texas Ranger teams. I mean, and I mentioned Bobby Witt. And one of the things you did, Bobby, that was really cool, it was a game against the Yankees in 1987. I think Mattingly was going for his ninth consecutive game with a home run. He didn't get it, but Texas, blew the Yankees out that night, and the Yankees put Rick Cerone on the mound because it was a blowout. And what you did to counter that was you let Bobby Witt take an at bat that night. So I mean, you always appreciated your opposition as well. You knew that they had a pitcher out there who wasn't a true pitcher, so you put a hitter out there who wasn't a true hitter. And that's what I always liked about you, Bobby, is like you really appreciate not just your team and the game, but also the opposition as well.
Yeah, Bobby Witt Sr., Bobby Witt Jr. is out there playing right now, one of the best players in the game of baseball. Yeah. And Bobby Witt Sr. was a number one draft choice out of University of Oklahoma, who had a fastball, didn't have the control that I wish he had, but went on to pitch about 18 years in the major leagues. He's now an agent for baseball players. And yeah, he pinch hit that night against Rick Cerone, and he pinched hit for Pete Incaviglia, who was our home run hitter on the team. And Inky was upset he didn't get a shot at Cerone for another home run.
And it's funny you bring up Pete, because he was a tremendous home run hitter, and had he been able to cut down on the strikeouts, I think he would have been a better player than he was. But man, when he hit a home run, that ball just traveled. I mean, he could really put the ball out of the park.
Obviously, I took him right out of college. He played his first professional game in the major leagues for the Texas Rangers, and because of the strikeouts, he kind of lost favor in baseball. But I always said, a strikeout was just one out. It wasn't a double play, and a home run's a home run, and he could do better than anyone else. Kind of sounds like what they say today about guys who can hit home runs, like whatever. There's a whole bunch of guys who strike out a lot and guys who hit 35 home runs and they make millions of dollars. I think he was just doing it before his time.
Yeah, I mean, he really could hit the ball. And I mean, I always loved watching baseball in the late 80s, early 90s, because I mean, back then, I mean, you would just see so many of these guys developing as players. So let me ask you this, Bobby. You mentioned earlier in the show how you had managed in Japan, and that's never easy to kind of move your family from the United States to another country and manage, but you did it. And I mean, I really, just applaud you, like how you were able to make the transition and do that. But talk about managing in Japan. And I'll tell you, baseball in Japan is as big as it is in the United States. I mean, and so many great athletes, so many great players have come out of Japan. And as you could see, what's going on with the free agency the last couple of weeks, we have so many players who are going to sign big contracts. But just talk about your time managing in Japan.
Yeah, Mike, I went there the same year Hideo Nomo went to the Dodgers. So he was basically the first Japanese player to come over, and I was the first ever non-Japanese to manage in Japan. and it was quite an honor. I lasted 7 years total. I loved it there. I finally had to get back, but everything about Japanese baseball and Japanese culture fit really well with me, even though it was difficult. When you see players come over from another country and they have to learn another language, they have to try to get accustomed to where they're living and the food that's being served and the traffic that you have to drive in, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite a chore, and I did that on the reverse side. Wound up learning to speak the language. Wound up winning the first ever Japanese and Asian championship uh, by someone other than a Japanese manager, and it probably was the greatest time of my life.
Yeah, I mean, and it just says a lot about you that you know, you went to a new country and the stuff you were able to do there. And I mean, like I said, I just love watching the talent that comes out of Japan. There's so many great players, it is just awesome to watch. So, Bobby, you take over for the Mets in late 96 and then 97 and 98, back to back seasons. And that's the other thing, too, Bobby. I always felt like, I think now people appreciate it. But back when you were the manager of the Mets, it's New York and the media is going to be tough. The fans are going to be tough at times. But I mean, you were one of the best managers the Mets ever had. I mean, the run you had there, not many Met managers could say that. And I think about the 99 season because to me, you guys winning that big wild card game in Cincinnati. I mean, I really felt like the Mets needed to do that. And then, I mean, you saw what they did in 2000, but I really felt that game that Al Leiter pitched that day in the wild card game against Cincinnati. That was, you needed to get over the hump there. And then Mets baseball took off the following year.
Yeah, that was a one game playoff when you only had one wild card team, and we won 96 games, and Cincinnati won 96 games. So it wasn't like some of the wild cards that you see getting in today. I mean, we had a great season, and we almost were held out of the playoffs. Cincinnati, managed by Jack McKean with Barry Larkin on the team, came one game short, didn't get into the playoffs that year. So that was it. It was really special. We got down 0-3
Atlanta.
to
Yeah.
the great Atlanta Braves, and then won a couple games, almost came back and won, tied up the series, won extra innings, and then went on the next year to win the National League.
Right. And one of the guys, you mentioned being down 3-0 to Atlanta, but you won a crucial game 4. And the guy that really pitched great that night was Rick Reed. And he's another guy that, like, I really felt like he always believed that you had the confidence in him and believed in him. And like I said, his best years were with the Mets and under your leadership. So, I mean, you were always good. Like, guys that were like maybe, you know, good players, maybe not great players, they always overperformed when you managed them. And I loved watching Rick Reed pitch. I always felt like he was a big game pitcher.
Well, interestingly enough, Mike, I probably only had one great player with the Mets, and that was Mike Piazza. And our budget was always limited, and we had to win with players who weren't going to the Hall of Fame, with players who had to give all of their energy and all of their talents. And people say what you said, that the players who weren't great players played great for me. Well, that's only because I only had players who weren't great, and they did play great.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the 2000 season, Bobby, because I'll tell you this. All year, I'm a big Yankees fan. All year, did not want the Yankees to play the Mets. I was hoping that, no offense, but I was hoping the Giants would beat the Mets. I was hoping the Cardinals would, because I just feared that Mets team because, again, other than Piazza, there weren't great players, but these guys were clutch players, and these guys knew how to win. And, I mean, you got so much production out of Benny Agbayani, Timo Perez. Even you guys got Mike Bordick late in the season. He played well. Todd Pratt off the bench did a great job. Jay Payton, as I mentioned, Agardo Alfonso, who at the time was a great second baseman. And of course, Todd Zeal did a great job for you guys. So, I mean, that team, in a lot of ways, was like a team that didn't really have other than Mike, a true superstar, but they knew how to win.
Well, the 99 team you mentioned, the New York Sports Writers next year for the 25th year. I don't think I'm supposed to say that yet. So we'll wait until they announce it. But
But
yeah, 99 was a terrific team. In 2000 was a different team. But as you mentioned, those guys came through. And, Mike Hampton was a bulldog out on the mound. And, Glendon Rush pitching for us, Rick Reed pitching for us. I guess Masato Yoshi. I mean, we had, or maybe he was just in '99. We had a bunch of really good guys who liked each other, and that always helps.
yeah, and I mean, the way you guys just, you went through the Cardinals, like, I thought that would be a tough series. And I mean, Hampton just pitched his, heart out for two of those 5 games. And I mean, Timo Perez, I mentioned him. What a series he had. Then, of course, I mean, you would get production from so many people. But talk about that moment winning the pennant that Monday night, when Timo Perez makes the final catch, first pennant since 1986, because that was a big moment at Shea Stadium that night.
Well, I was glad we got to do it at home, and it was a special night, and just the thought that the Yankees, who were kind of stumbling a little, I think, during the season there, um, we're in the playoffs, and as soon as we clinched the championship, then the focus became, oh my gosh, not only we have to play him in the interleague play, which was a circus every time we played, and now we're going to have to play him in a World Series. A World Series game, that they had never, they hadn't lost in like 12 straight games, I think, and
Yeah.
now we're going to play him in the World Series. Yeah.
And Bobby, I always think of game one, and I just think about, I don't believe in curses or any of that stuff, but talk about just having bad luck in one game. I mean, Todd Zeal hits a ball that just misses going out. It hits the top of the wall. Timo Perez gets thrown out at home. Then there was a play where I think um, it might have been Zeal again, where he hits a ball that looks like it's going foul and it goes back fair. He gets thrown out. Then there was another play where the ball goes right to the plate and the guy gets called out. So, I mean, I felt like that game one, like you guys played such a great game, right there till the end. But you guys were so like, just bad luck caused you to lose that first game.
Well, there was some happenstance, that's for sure. And, I think maybe, we had someone picked off at first base too, which is, a crucial no.
Yeah.
We actually, even before the game with Pettit pitching, told the guys if they didn't want to take a lead, if you wanted to just stay on the base, you could just stay on the base and then get your lead after you were sure that he pitched, because he had, a spectacular pickoff move, which was borderline balk move, of course, but that's what spectacular moves were, and he was very good at it.
Yeah. And Bobby, a lot of people in baseball, media people, they always want to second guess, but I never second guessed you for not taking Al Leiter out in game 5. And the reason I didn't, he started that inning with 2 straight strikeouts. It was a close pitch to Posada. Posada walks, and then Bros just gets a hit. But, it wasn't like Louis Soho pounded the ball. You got to, like, little hopper that went up the middle. But I felt like Leiter that night proved what kind of big game pitcher he was. And I mean, man, like Joe Torre said it many times, he deserved to win or lose that game because he pitched so well that it was his to finish no matter what.
Yeah, he struck out the side in the 8th too, and there was no reason to save anything. I think if you looked at this speed gun or the rotation and spin of his pitches, he was throwing just as good then as he was at any time. And when Al's throwing the ball well, he was as good as we had.
Right. Bobby, it's hard to say that a regular season game might be just as special as a playoff game, but I think a game that could probably come close to matching your pennant winning game would be the first night back at Shea Stadium after the terrorist attacks and that magical home run that Mike Piazza hit, because that really uplifted the fans that night who were in the building. It was very quiet that whole night. And I mean, it was just one of the most special moments in the game of baseball. Just talk about being there that night and seeing a moment like that.
Yeah, Mike, it was special, but it was. It was an event. It was more than a baseball game. It was a happening. It was a moment in time that was needed, and baseball got to play probably its most important role in American history. I think, more important than Jackie Robinson and the color barrier, more important than interleague play and designated hitter. That this moment in time started the healing process for a nation that needed something crazy to happen, something miraculous to happen, some way for the good guys to rise above the fray. And we're playing Atlanta. You know the story on us in Atlanta, and for us to win that game on that night was as most special event that I think baseball has ever had.
Right. It definitely was. Bobby, one of the things too that I've always admired about you is, you know, you know that sometimes talk show hosts, they're going to, grill you on certain things. They're going to be tough at times. They're not always going to make you happy, and there's times they're going to annoy you, but you never really held a grudge ever, which I thought was really, neat about you. And I can remember many times you and Mike Francesa would go at it, but then the next time you're on the show, you two are joking around. So you never, at least in my eyes, you never took it personal. And I think, like, as time went on, a guy like Mike especially, he respected and admired, who you were as a human being. So just talk about, like, those years, especially when you were on WFAN with them a lot.
Yeah, that was must listen to radio. I thought we did great together. I still do shows with Mike and with Chris Russo.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, did one with Chris yesterday. So yeah, there was never any hard feelings. I mean, they had to say what they had to say to do their job, and I had to do my job. So I think we all understood that, and it wasn't fun at times. Heck, we were in the same town as the Yankees. Mike was a Yankee fan. Chris
Yeah.
Russo was a Giant fan. We beat the Giants and Barry Bonds in the playoffs. He was never happy with our situation, and Mike always felt threatened that maybe his great Yankees would be upseated anyway by the Mets. So it was great working with those guys. They were pros. They were prepared, and they knew what they had to do. That was a new era of sports. I started managing, in the mid '80s, and that was basically as ESPN was getting a firm foothold in America, and 24-hour sports was becoming the norm. And then I managed through the new era of talk radio, which was a new way that sports fans were getting their news and talking about their favorite teams. And then I managed in Boston in 2012, and that was basically the beginning of what the internet was going to be like, and that new medium. So it was all a real interesting time in my managerial career.
Yeah. And, Bobby, I mean, going in, you got to be a little thick skinned as well. But I mean, you managed in New York, you managed in Boston. And, you know, I'll be honest, I don't really know what the media is like in Texas, but again, you were managing a lot of veteran players as well. So I mean, it's never been an easy road when you've managed, and I mean, there's been a lot of tough times, but I mean, you always seem like you can handle pressure. That's the one thing I've always thought about you throughout your career is you're not afraid of a challenge. You'll go out there and take it and you'll embrace it. And you're not worried about, okay, what might happen if I'm losing 8 in a row or something like that. Because I assume you can't manage that way thinking of that stuff.
No, I don't think you can. You mentioned those three. I also managed in Japan, where they have 8 daily sports
Yeah.
newspapers that come out, and they really scrutinize everything that happens. But of the three, I think that the Rangers reporters were the toughest. I think that the New York ones were the most informed, and the Boston writers. Uh, I don't know. I saw what they did to Bill Buckner, and I understand that they probably are. Well, whatever. They they didn't they didn't they didn't light my fire with their knowledge of the game or their appreciation of their job, for the most part.
Yeah, and Bobby, one of the things I was thinking about too is, you, on a good year when you have a great team, you are still going to lose probably, 63 to 65 games. And it must be tough at times every night, win or lose, have to answer questions. And some of them, you can't really like say, oh, what happened to Nolan Ryan tonight, or what happened to Josh Beckett. You really can't, because there's going to be games they're just going to be off, and that's just the way it is. But I mean, having to answer that 162 times a year, that can't always be fun either.
I don't know, fun. It's part of the job, and
Right.
going in that you're going to speak to the press before the game. You're going to speak to them after the game. Sometimes you get to speak to them during the game, and it's part of the job.
Right. So, Bobby, one of the things that I really loved that you did, and it was most recently, probably a good 5 to 6 years, is you became the athletic director at Sacred Heart University and came back to Connecticut. And it just, to me, I thought that was so cool that you took on that job. Just talk about, the experience of being an athletic director at Sacred Heart.
Yeah, I did that for 8 years, Mike, and I went in not knowing much and came out knowing a lot more. I was there during a lot of transition years of the NC2A, as well as the growth years of Sacred Heart University, which when I got there, I think it was at 3,500 undergraduates. Now it's over 7,000. I've got a building with my name on it. We won championships. We had fun. 34 Division I teams. There's a lot going on, and it was probably as good of an experience as I had in my life. Showing up every day with 1,000 student athletes who were there trying to do their best.
Right. And Bobby, I think you're currently, and I think we might have lost him for a second. We'll get him back on.
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, there you are.
yeah.
Bobby, you're currently, I believe, doing Angel broadcast, correct?
Yeah, I do some the Angel broadcasts. I work here with Perry Manassian, who's the general manager, whose father I mentioned, who was the clubhouse guy when I broke it in 1968, remained my very good friend, became the clubhouse guy in Texas for 35 years. And I've known Perry Manassian since he was born. And I'm at his side, hoping to see him win a championship out here before it's all over.
Yeah, and I mean, what a you know, thrill it must be to be calling games like that. You got to, watch a guy like Otani all the time, and then of course Mike Trout. And I mean, you know, they love their baseball in Anaheim. They really do. So I mean, that had to be it has to be fun now because you could just call the games. You're not worried about, did this guy not pitch good? You don't have to deal with the media or anything like that. You're just getting to, analyze a baseball game. And I mean, that has to be like a cool thing you're doing right now.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about the game. And again, being side by side with the general manager is fun too, even though, we haven't had the wins that we want to have. And, we haven't had the health that we want to have. Maybe the team will be healthy this year and the wins will follow.
Now, Bobby, in life, you can never say never. Is Bobby Valentine done managing, or is there always a chance that someday you'll
No,
return?
I don't want to manage again. I did enough of that for a lifetime. And, now, as I say, what I'm doing on and off the field is a lot more enjoyable than getting on planes and traveling across the country at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's for sure.
Right. So give me a prediction, Bobby. And it's hard to tell because you don't know where, his mind is right now, but is how he wants to do this. But where do you see Yamamoto going if you had to guess today?
He'll go to the highest bidder. That makes me think he's going to go to the Mets.
Yeah.
Steve should be the highest bidder, but San Francisco's rolling out the red carpet. The Yankees need pitching, and those are three, you know, wealthy franchises. San Francisco unloading a lot of their salaries, so they could go toe to toe with anybody out there, and they really want them. So it'll be one of those three, and I wouldn't count San Francisco out.
Right. And you know what? I mean, San Francisco, just when you think they're not going to sign that big player, they could, sneak right in there and do it. It wouldn't shock me at all. And I wouldn't rule the Dodgers out either, but, it'll be an interesting couple weeks for sure. But Bobby, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. It was a real honor for me. And just like I said, all of us in Connecticut, we love Bobby V. We appreciate all the work you do, especially, in the community. And just thank you for what you've done for the game of baseball, what you've done for the state of Connecticut, and for the community in general. Really appreciate it, and thank you again for coming on.
Hey, you got it, Mike. Thank you very much for having me. You did a good job. Stay healthy and have a good holiday. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bobby. And of course, folks, that's the one and only Bobby Valentine for In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.